Welcome to Uncommon Knowledge. I'm Peter Robinson. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/UNC Knowledge, twitter.com/UNC Knowledge. Born in Avignon on Christmas Day 1923, René Girard is the author of works that have been published in more than 24 languages, including The Scapegoat and Things Hidden Since the Foundation of the World. His latest book, Archivé Clausewitz, will be published in the United States in 2010 as Battling to the End: Politics, War, and Apocalypse. In 2005, Professor Girard received the highest honor in France, induction as one of the 40 members of the Académie Française. One source of René Girard's thinking, a close reading of The Golden Bough, Sir James Fraser's classic study of ancient myths. Published in 1890, The Golden Bough explained that myths throughout the ancient world contained a central element, the periodic sacrifice of a sacred king, dying and then resurrected. Christianity, The Golden Bough suggested, represented nothing but one more such myth, a point to which we will return. René Girard, bienvenue.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Segment 1, Insights. Mimetic Desire. To quote one of your interpreters, Gil Bailey, quote, "Desire, as distinguished from animal appetite, is always aroused by the desire of another." Explain.
If, in order to invent desire, because desire is not natural, desire is not animal. Is it human? We don't know. It sometimes is human, sometimes it seems very inhuman. But how is it born? I think desire usually is born out of the contemplation of someone else who is desiring and who designates to you the object is desiring as desirable.
So every college student who wants to be an investment banker, obvious. They want to fly around in their own jet and
Yes.
drive a Maserati. But how does this apply to the ancient world?
Well, to the ancient world, it has to apply in the same fashion. The objects are different, but the structure of desire, the triangular relationship of desire, object, model, and subject, are the same.
Serpent, Eve, apple.
Serpent in the Mimetic Theory of desire is a symbol, an image of the mediator. In other words, the one who directs the subject towards the bad desire. The churches, who know what they're talking about much better than most people think, know that example is the key to bad as well as good behavior. And this is nothing but what I call mimetic desire.
So that's why the church uses the phrase the occasion of sin.
Yes.
Now, Gil Bailey once again, the imitative nature of desire leads to conflict.
It leads to conflict, and this is both something very obvious and which is a paradox for most people when they first realize it. If you imitate the desire of someone else, you admire that someone else, or that someone else may be your best friend. But as soon as you both desire the same object, and the objects really desirable exist only in one copy.
In ones.
So I shouldn't say copy because it's not a copy. It's the original.
There is only one
There is only one
Helen of Troy.
Original. And therefore they have to fight. Therefore the theatrical situation par excellence is a situation of two people desiring the same object because they designate that object to each other. Once the imitated subject realizes he is imitated, this reinforces his desire. He said, I certainly selected the right object. As soon as this man saw her, he fell in love with her, like I did. Therefore, we are right. Therefore, I'm more convinced than ever that I should desire her. Therefore, he's my enemy.
All right. I'm chuckling because as the audience will learn, as simple as it sounds, it explains everything in a way. Let me quote you yourself, René, this time. If this moves on to your second basic insight, the violence and the sacred. If there is a normal order in societies, it must be the fruit of an anterior crisis. Explain.
It must be the result of an interior crisis because people polarize around objects of desire. And this can be regarded as true even for food, for shelter, for places where you can live and so forth. So you can be sure that the human population in prehistorical time gathered around the same places because they were desirable, because there was water there and so forth. And they were united by that same desire. And they were separated because very often there was not enough of whatever was needed, water, shelter, food, and they started to fight. That's why I don't think we should say man is so bad, that he will always fight with his fellow man, even when he associates. The people he associates most closely with are the people he fights most often with. They do because they are both moving toward the same thing. And these things are never in sufficient number. Or even if they are, you tend to trust your model.
All right.
Because you admire him. So you say, he's seen in the object something more than I saw, and therefore I must follow him more than ever. And this works both ways. As the one who desires first is imitated in his desire, he's confirmed in that desire. But the conflictual situation is all over the place, it's coming from everywhere.
All right. Segment 2, the scapegoating mechanism. Let's say we're in the prehistoric world. You're describing the most basic sources of conflict, and now the most basic means of resolving conflict.
Yeah, because the question is how such conflicts resolved. They have to be resolved at least part of the time for groups of human beings to gather permanently together and so forth.
So the question is, how do societies manage to exist?
People imitate each other. People imitate each other in their desire. But they also imitate each other in their dislikes, I just said. And therefore, when you have a conflict which is particularly visible and obvious and so forth, there will be a tendency for the neighbors of the people concerned to move with the stronger of the two, the most convincing of the two, and be on his side against the other one. And when you have a second one, you have a third one, a fourth one, it becomes easier and easier. And the mimetic, because all this is always mimetic. You see, that's the thing you have to see. The real motor is imitation each time. Imitation of friendship, imitation of desire, and imitation of conflict. So, if it is so, there should not be any human society. It should be impossible.
Total conflict all the time.
Total conflict all the time. But if you have that total conflict, you also have a way in which this conflict is automatically, cancelled and resolved by. And it is when people imitate no longer the choice of opponent, but also what they feel about everything. And they are all going to gather against the same opponent. if one really feels convinced that one of the people there is more guilty than the other one. The notion of guilt will appear in the collective interplay of these people. And as soon as this happens, it gathers speeds, and ultimately one victim must be killed or driven out or otherwise gotten rid of. And this is what I call this, what not I, but everybody calls the scapegoat. The word scapegoat comes from the Bible, the Tyndale translation of the Bible in English. In most European languages, they say emissary goat, emissary victim, victim who is sent out of the community or who is killed. You see, but that's when everybody agrees that there must be one who is more of a culprit than the others. Therefore, they unite against that one.
And this mechanism is what underlies these myths that Fraser cataloged all around the world, not just Western, not just Greek and Roman myths, although that, of course, is where he
and that's what he doesn't see, because he excludes the West. The West is too high, too intelligent, too superior to the rest of humanity to be part. Fraser discovers only archaic or primitive society scapegoats,
and so
African scapegoats.
It is your belief that the pattern that underlies myths around the world of the dying and resurrected king reflects actual events in prehistoric society. And we're talking about, we have to establish the scope of time we're discussing here. You're actually talking about early Homo sapiens, 500,000 years.
Early,
so this goes on for hundreds of thousands of years
I'm not
and becomes ritualized in myth.
In finding out the exact time, it's not my business. I'm a pure theoretician. You see, but I say at some point, people must have been reconciled in order to create communities, permanent communities, against not a leader directly, but a scapegoat. That they all killed together, and it united them. That's why, if you look at myth, they all have the same shape. It's always a story of a man who is killed by an entire community.
Oedipus, mythical king of Thebes. The plague comes to Thebes. Yeah. Oedipus discovers that years before, unwittingly, he had killed his father and mother. He's horrified. He blinds himself. It's a community
that discovers that.
All right, that's what I want. So we know the Oedipus myth. Explain how that...
And Oedipus is killed. Therefore, the community gathers around Oedipus, because Oedipus has solved the problem in a way of the disunity of the community by dying. After the death of Oedipus, people find that they have no more enemy. And they have a moment where they say, this man divided us, but in order to reconcile us. Therefore, he's a God. Therefore, he is the one who is moving us towards some kind of new form of unity. Not against him, but we should be afraid of him, but he's fundamentally good. He's a God.
All right. Segment 3. The myth that happened. The crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth. Luke chapter 23. Now when the centurion saw what was done, he glorified God, saying, certainly, this was a righteous man. And the people smote their breasts.
You hit the right spot there, because you mention immediately what myth cannot say. Myth never see that the victim is innocent. You see.
Oedipus really did kill his father and mother. He really did bear
That's right.
guilt.
And the first interpreters of the myth took it quite seriously, because they saw violence as the main business of myth, and therefore they believed it was a real murderer who had been killed. In reality, it's an imaginary murderer, a scapegoat.
But the community believed in his guilt.
The community believed in his guilt. That's why the community wanted to repeat these things, thought that the God was teaching them to repeat it on new, more victims. That's why they invented sacrifice.
All right. And so when in the Golden Bough, Fraser suggests that Christianity, and he has as much of a shock
Yeah.
on late 19th century, the West, as did Darwin.
Yeah, but at
he's
least-
less known now, but it's still that Christianity is nothing but one more myth that takes the pattern of the dying and resurrected God. And Fraser believed it, and so intellectuals to this day believe it. And you answer how?
I answer very simply that Fraser was perfectly right to point to the similarities between myth and Christianity. In both instances, you have a victim who is killed by an entire community and who becomes the god of, or who becomes, or who is, who's always been, in the case of Christ, of the community. What Fraser didn't see, which is the simplest thing of all, and should convince everybody immediately, if they were honest, that Christianity is very different from mythology while being the same. It's exactly the same situation. Is that Christianity tells you that Christ was innocent, whereas all myths tell you the victim is guilty. The victim is a god, but gods are guilty characters. They are dangerous characters. They can be good to you through strange circumstances that are not very easy to understand, but they can also do all sorts of bad things,
Right.
which is not the case of Christ. Simply, Christianity tells you Christ is innocent. And people don't see that it's the first time in the history of mankind that a myth occurs which is read not falsely, with the victim guilty, but with the victim innocent, sent by God himself. If God allows scapegoating to happen, it's because he wants humanity to exist and so forth. But of course, Christ is very different from any other scapegoat. And he's the Son of God, and he is misunderstood when people see him as exactly the same thing as mythical heroes. He's a mythical hero, but he's innocent.
René, why, this is the question of soteriology, if I am pronouncing it correctly, the theologians, the theology of the cross. What changes when this innocent God-man dies on the cross? How does that affect human understanding? Why is that a saving event?
Well, because if you read the mythical situation the way I just did, you see, you can see there is something which is not purely human about it. We are offered all these victims and we take them for culprits and so forth. In the case of Christianity, there are a few disciples who say, no, he's not guilty, who maintain to the end that he is innocent, whatever people may say about him. Therefore, they say the truth simply. They say a truth which is anthropological before being religious, but which is the same thing.
And so Christ's death on the cross frees humankind from this
Yes.
deep, profound, inescapable, and largely hidden cycle of the scapegoating impulse.
Yes. Potentially it does. It does. And Christianity asserts certainly that it does, that it's the only true religion, and that it says the truth about man and about God. But very few people take these statements seriously, as you well know. And
Why?
they should take them
Why?
literally.
Why? You have said
Well,
it several
because
points now.
it's-
It's obvious once you see it. It's the
Yeah.
simplest. Christianity is different, and yet, and yet
They
we
don't
see
want it.
They don't want it.
But you know as much about that as I do. I mean, we just have to see the fact that they don't see both. You see, the Christians don't dare see the similarity because they are too timid. If you
They're
tell
afraid
them
that Christianity may be one
may
other
be a
myth.
myth, therefore they refuse to say the situation is the mythical one. But they say the truth about it and there is no more myth. Christianity destroys mythology.
All right. Segment 4, René Girard and the Modern World. From your most recent book, Archive Clausewitz, to be published in this country under the title Battling to the End. Quote, history, you might say, is a test for mankind, but we know very well that mankind is failing that test. Explain.
Mankind is failing that test because mankind has the truth in the reality of Christianity, which is there, and this truth has been there for 2,000 years, and instead of moving ahead and becoming more widespread, today it's becoming more restricted. Christianity is less and less popular every day, and is accused of all sorts of things, which smell very much like a scapegoating process.
Well, all right, so in the contemporary setting, we have Christopher Hitchens saying that Christianity is responsible for all kinds of evils.
Yeah.
It's the usual catalog. I don't mean to demean Christopher's argument. He's a man of integrity, but the religious warfare, on and on. And
Right.
you say, no, that's not Christianity. It is what?
But it is an effort to restore, if you want, the mythical world, which doesn't perceive itself as it should.
To unite by way of a common antagonism and then to do violence to the other. Mm-hmm. What we see in the religious warfare, what we see in communism is a reemergence of the ancient pattern.
What we see in human society as a whole, in a way, people always unite around victims. But in order to unite solidly, they must keep believing that these victims are guilty. And they are not. So, in other words, Christianity is the myth that reads all myth, the myth which is read and reads all myth. So people say, you're doing anthropology or you're doing mythology. And I answer, no. I'm showing that to read mythology right and to have the true anthropology are one and the same thing.
From Battling to the End again, Modern World. Personally, I have the impression that Islam has used the Bible, that is, incorporated elements of the Bible, as a support to rebuild an archaic religion. While Christianity eliminates sacrifice wherever it gains a foothold, Islam seems to situate itself prior to that rejection.
Yeah, Christianity, Islam is a big problem for Christianity because it comes after Christianity. And it is intelligent enough and religious enough, in a certain sense, to use aspects of Christianity that make it more credible than archaic religion. Therefore, but I think it's very important to realize that it's not the same message, really. It seems to be, but it's not the same message. Because the peace and the refusal of violence of Christianity is not there.
And yet you also argue in Battling to the End that terrorism is something new and alien to the classical Islamic tradition.
Yes.
Where does it come from, and what's the correct way for us to think about it?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, well...
This is television. Make up an answer, René.
No, I don't want to make up an answer.
No, of course not.
It's too serious a question, because you're talking about millions and millions of people.
Of course. In some way...
And these people are honest. Now, as a Christian, I would say they are potential Christians. We want to convert each other, and it's a normal thing to do. Mm-hmm. We want all the Muslims to become Christians, just as the Muslims want all the Christians to become Muslim.
Now, in Battling to the End, you argue that the modern world finds itself in a peculiar predicament. the archaic pattern no longer works
No
because it's been
longer works.
exposed. It's impossible to be a genuine pagan. After the Christian event, you just can't go back. It has happened. So it no longer works. At the same time, that is to say, it no longer is genuinely unifying. It no longer is ritualized in myths that people at least half believe. And at the same time, we have the march of technology making the scapegoating mechanism more and more dangerous.
Yes, we have or we might simply say that man has become capable of destroying his own world for good,
And
to make it unable to support life, to
We have-
destroy the atmosphere. I take very seriously. Today we live a very strange period because the apocalyptic texts, the great apocalyptic texts for me, are not the texts which are entitled Apocalypse of John. They are the texts which are at the end of the
Gospels.
of the synoptic gospels, especially Luke and
The reading last Sunday.
the
The end of the world will
That's
come.
right.
The end of the world will come, but it is not for you to know the time.
In the old days, I remember before the invention of the atom bomb, priests in church always talked about this apocalyptic text on the last day of the year, of the liturgical year, which was the last day of the time after Pentecost, which was a week ago, and the first day of the Advent, which was an apocalyptic day too. These texts were read, and I remember the time when they were the only thing that impressed me very much in readings at church, and in a way, the inspiration of my whole work is there. I've been talking about this text all the time.
Well, final quotation from Battling to the End. In some way, the Gospels and Scriptures are predicting that mankind will fail the test of history, since they end with eschatological themes, literally the end of the world. How do you think about the present age? Is this a time of testing? Is it a time of ultimate doom?
Well, look at the apocalyptic text in the Gospel. One thing which is very characteristic is the mixture of the human and the natural. That is the reason why people consider that they are not serious scientifically and so forth and so forth. But look at the times we are living today. If there is a new hurricane in New Orleans, is it nature alone or is it nature helped by man? So to be in apocalyptic times means precisely that, in my view. The time when you no longer know if it is nature which is hurting you or if it is man himself who is helping the apocalyptic forces.
René, segment 5, your personal story. You've been quoted as saying that you've undergone 2 conversions, and the first was intellectual. The intellectual conversion occurred, I'm assuming, when reading the Golden Bough, you recognized that Christianity was different. Am I correct about that?
Yes, but this is not necessarily a Christian. It's the encounter of these texts with the Gospels, which convinced me.
And
then when I realized precisely that it's this mixture, there will be the sea and the roaring of the waves and so forth, and man will fight man, and city against city and so forth. It's always symmetrical, like what I call the doubles, the basic conflictual situation. When you realize that these 2 things are one.
I'm looking to you for a little cheer here. The apocalyptic, when I was a teenager, the apocalyptic texts impressed me as well. They scared the wits out of me.
Yeah.
And in fact, I can remember hearing a country preacher talking about the He somehow or other had
But
the hydrogen bomb predicted
look,
in the book of Revelation. But
people
that's
want
not
to be scared today. All their films and so forth. The only
Paranormal
fear,
Activities is a big hit.
the only fear they refuse is a good one, the one that says there must be a God there, who is in charge, and who can reward as well as punish.
Do you believe, I've got a question here from a viewer, Todd Jones. Does René Girard believe that there's any way to turn the tide?
Yes, behaving like Christians.
All right. Now, René, to conclude, would you indulge me in concluding this interview? I would like to ask you to be my personal guide here and demonstrate to me a close Girardian reading of a text. I'll give you a couple of passages and ask you to comment on it. Luke chapter 1. And the angel came in unto her and said, Hail, thou that art highly favored, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women. And when she saw him, she was troubled at his saying. And the angel said unto her, Fear not, Mary, for thou hast found favor with God. What is that woman doing in the Christian myth?
Well, that Christian is part, that woman is part, is very important part, is Mary. And she's the mother of the child who is Christ and who is the Son of God, who is the presence of God on this earth. Therefore, it's very important. Protestant and Catholics give various different importance to Mary and so forth. I don't think it's very important. The importance is to see that it justifies, in a way, history in a religious way. That history is both human and divine, and that the consequences, in a way, are always made manifest by God. For the right reason.
There's no stagecraft here. There's no melodrama.
There is no melodrama.
You have a simple girl who's scared witless.
That's right.
All right. Chapter 2. And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And Joseph went up from Galilee into Judea, into the city of David, which is called Bethlehem. And so it was that while they were there, Mary brought forth her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them at the inn. This is an odd appearance for the God, the dying and resurrected God, to be making.
Well, it is the proof and the statement that what is really going on the historical plane has very little to do with the Roman Empire and what was going on in the world in the 2nd century AD.
So we begin with, in effect, the front page of the New York Times, Caesar Augustus decree, and then the gospel immediately shows us what is important is a secret, ordinary human truth here.
That's right.
Taking place in a little out of the way.
Yeah, but taking place only in one place, being unique, being something which has to be discovered, which we cannot afford to say, oh, well, okay, it's there, it's unimportant. No, it's not unimportant. It's destiny and the duty of our life to look for the truth, which is hidden from the point of view of the Roman Empire.
Final passage, Luke chapter 2. And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men.
Yeah.
René, you remember the Second World War. You lived in occupied Paris, the Second World War, 50 million dead, the Holocaust, the tens of millions killed by the communists, all in your lifetime. How do you make sense of, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men?
Well, the first sense to make is that most men, and especially the most powerful, were not full of peace and good intentions. And well, human life is essentially drama. And maybe one thing that churches don't emphasize enough is that human beings like drama. They would like to be part of an immense fight between good and evil and so forth. What these texts say is that in their own way, each one of them is part of that struggle, you know, which I think is very important and very hopeful.
The ordinary Christian
Yes.
is not going to read every word of the Girard Reader or every word of your many books. Can you sum up the
It's
meaning?
really very unimportant. He may have insights which are more profound than mine, and he should believe and he should trust that he's a very important man for God, and that his understanding of reality as a religious history is an event that rejoices God.
René Girard, thank you very much. I should say Joyeux Noël.
Joyeux Noël. Merry Christmas.
I'm Peter Robinson for Uncommon Knowledge and the Hoover Institution. Thanks for joining us.